Emma Roberts wiped down the last table at Miller's Diner as the evening shift came to an end. Her hands were rough from years of hard work, but her spirit remained unbroken. At 28, she had been working as a waitress for 5 years. Ever since her world turned upside down, the diner was nearly empty now. Only the soft hum of the coffee machine and the gentle clatter of dishes being washed in the kitchen could be heard. Emma moved slowly between the tables, her feet aching in worn-out shoes that she had been meaning to replace for months. "Mummy, I'm tired," whispered her 6-year-old daughter, Lucy, from the corner booth where she sat coloring. Lucy's golden curls caught the diner's warm light, and her bright blue eyes looked up at her mother with pure love. Her small fingers gripped a red crayon as she worked on a drawing of a house with a big garden. Emma's heart ached as she looked at her daughter. She had to bring Lucy to work again because she couldn't afford a babysitter. Mrs. Johnson from downstairs had offered to watch Lucy for free, but Emma didn't want to be a burden. The rent was due in 3 days, and she was still short £50. But looking at her daughter's sweet face, she found strength she didn't know she had. "Just a few more minutes, sweetheart," Emma said softly, kneeling beside Lucy. Her voice was gentle, the same tone she used when Lucy had nightmares. "Then we'll go home, and I'll read you that story about the brave little mouse." Lucy's face lit up with excitement. She loved that story about the little mouse who saved her family from the big scary cat, the one where the mouse becomes a hero. She asked, her eyes sparkling. "Yes, that one." Emma smiled, brushing a curl away from Lucy's forehead. The simple joy on her daughter's face made all the hard work worth it. Lucy smiled and hugged her mother tightly, her small arms wrapping round Emma's neck. "I love you, Mummy. You're the best mummy in the whole world." Emma felt tears prick her eyes, despite all their struggles, despite the empty refrigerator at home and the stack of unpaid bills on the kitchen table. Lucy's love made everything worthwhile. She was determined to give her daughter a better life, no matter what it took. Every double shift, every sore foot, every sleepless night worrying about money was worth it for this little girl who believed her mother was perfect. The diner's bell jingled as the last customer left. Mr. Miller, the owner, poked his head out from the kitchen. He was a kind man in his 60s who understood Emma's situation. He had 3 daughters of his own and knew how hard it was to raise a child alone. "You can head home now, Emma," he said with a warm smile. "Lucy's been such a good girl today. She can come with you any time you need." Emma nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Mr. Miller. I really appreciate your understanding." As she gathered Lucy's coloring books and crayons, Emma thought about the long walk home. Their small flat was 20 minutes away, but Lucy's little legs would make it 30. They would stop at the park if it wasn't too dark, and Lucy would tell her about all the colors she used in her drawings. Across town, in a luxurious office overlooking the city, James Hamilton sat alone at his desk. The floor-to-ceiling windows showed the lights of London twinkling like stars, but James barely noticed the beautiful view. At 35, he was one of Britain's youngest billionaires, having built a technology empire from nothing. But success had come at a price. His office was decorated with awards and certificates. Photos of him shaking hands with famous politicians and business leaders lined the walls. A crystal trophy from Entrepreneur of the Year sat on his mahogany desk, but none of these achievements brought him happiness. James stared at an old photograph tucked away in his desk drawer. It showed him and Emma from 7 years ago, laughing together on Brighton Beach. They had been so happy then, so in love. Emma wore a simple blue dress that matched her eyes, and her hair flew in the ocean breeze. James remembered that day perfectly. They had talked about their future, about the house they would buy, about the children they would have. But his business partner, Richard, had convinced him that Emma was only interested in his growing wealth. Richard had filled his head with doubts and suspicions. "She's just using you," Richard had said. "Once your company fails, she'll leave." The lies and manipulation had driven them apart just when James needed her most. He never knew that Emma had tried to reach him when she discovered she was pregnant. Richard had intercepted her calls and letters, telling her that James wanted nothing to do with her. Emma had called the office dozens of times, but Richard always had excuses. "James is in meetings," he would say, or "James is traveling." By the time James realized what had happened, Emma had disappeared. For years, James had searched for her, hiring private investigators and following every lead. He had checked every Emma Roberts in London, but she had changed her surname back too, her maiden name after they broke up. She remained invisible to his wealth and resources, living a quiet life of struggle and dignity in a part of the city he never visited. Tonight, James felt more alone than ever. All his money couldn't fill the emptiness in his heart. He closed the photograph and locked his drawer, wondering if he would ever find the love he had lost. The next morning brought unexpected challenges for Emma. She woke up early, as she always did, to prepare Lucy's breakfast and get ready for another long day at the diner. The sun was just beginning to peek through the thin curtains of their small flat when the phone rang. "Hello," Emma answered, already worried. Early morning calls were never good news. "I'm so sorry, dear," came the weak voice of Mrs. Patterson, her regular babysitter. The elderly woman lived in the building next door and had been watching Lucy. "For the past 2 months, I wouldn't want to give anything to little Lucy. I have the flu, and I'm feeling terrible." Emma's heart sank like a stone in water. Mrs. Patterson was the only babysitter she could afford, and even then, Emma could barely manage the £20 a week she paid her. She couldn't afford to miss work, not when she was already behind. On bills, the electricity company had already sent 2 warning letters, and the landlord had been asking about the rent. "Don't worry about it, Mrs. Patterson," Emma said, trying to keep the worry out of her voice. "Please take care of yourself, and get better soon." After hanging up the phone, Emma sat on her small sofa and put her head in her hands. What was she going to do? She had already missed 3 days of work last month when Lucy had a fever, and Mr. Miller had been understanding, but she couldn't push his kindness too far. With no other choice, she decided to bring Lucy to the diner. Again, it wasn't ideal, but it was better than losing her job. "Lucy, sweetheart," Emma called softly, waking her daughter. "We need to get ready a bit earlier today." Lucy rubbed her sleepy eyes and sat up in her small bed. "Why, Mummy, Mrs. Patterson is sick, so you're going to come to work with Mummy today. It's going to be an adventure," Emma told Lucy as they walked hand in hand down the busy London street. She tried to make it sound exciting rather than desperate. "You can help Mummy by being the best little helper ever." The morning air was crisp and cold. Emma pulled Lucy's coat tighter round her small shoulders. The streets were full of people rushing to work, cars honking, and the general noise of a city waking up. But Lucy didn't seem to mind the chaos round them. Lucy skipped alongside her mother, her small pink backpack bouncing with each step. Inside the backpack were her colouring books, crayons, a small sandwich for lunch, and her favourite stuffed rabbit named Benny. "Can I help you carry the plates, Mummy?" Emma smiled at her daughter's eagerness to help. "We'll see, sweetheart. Remember to stay in the corner booth and be very quiet. Some customers don't like children round when they're eating." "I'll be as quiet as a mouse," Lucy promised, making a zipping motion across her lips. Miller's Diner was a cozy place with red-checkered tablecloths and the smell of fresh coffee always in the air. The walls were decorated with old photographs of London, and there were plants on every windowsill. It felt warm and welcoming, especially on cold mornings like this one. The owner, Mr. Miller, was a kind man in his early 60s who understood Emma's situation. He had 3 daughters of his own, all grown up now, and he remembered how hard it had been when his wife was sick and he had to bring the girls to work sometimes. He had agreed to let Lucy stay as long as she didn't disturb the customers. "Good morning, Emma," Mr. Miller said with a warm smile as they entered. "And good morning to you too. Miss Lucy, you're early today." "Mrs. Patterson is sick," Lucy explained seriously. "So I'm going to help Mummy today." "That's very kind of you." Mr. Miller chuckled. "Just remember our rules. Okay. Meanwhile, across town." James woke up in his empty penthouse feeling restless. He had barely slept, tossing and turning all night with dreams of the past. His bedroom was huge, with expensive furniture and artwork, but it felt cold and lonely. The silence was too loud, if such a thing was possible. Something was pulling him toward the past, toward memories he usually tried to forget. He stood by his floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city below, but his mind was somewhere else entirely. On impulse, he decided to visit Miller's Diner, a place where he and Emma used to meet for a coffee during their university days. It was a strange choice for someone of his status. His friends and business partners would be confused if they knew he sometimes ate at a small diner instead of expensive restaurants. But Miller's Diner held memories that 5-star restaurants could never provide. He had been there many times over the years, hoping somehow to feel closer to her. The staff knew him as the quiet, well-dressed man who always sat alone and left generous tips. They never asked questions, and he never offered explanations. Take the day off, James told his assistant when she called about his morning meetings. "Cancel everything. I need some time to think." His assistant was surprised, but didn't argue. James Hamilton was known for being unpredictable sometimes, especially when it came to his personal time as he walked through the familiar streets toward the diner. James didn't know that fate was about to change everything. He wore a simple black coat over his expensive suit, trying to blend in with the other pedestrians. In just a few hours, 3 lives would collide in the most unexpected way. Emma was setting up Lucy's coloring books when she noticed the expensive black car pull up outside. Her heart did a little flutter, something she couldn't explain. She shook her head and got back to work, tying her apron and preparing for the busy lunch rush. Lucy looked up from her crayons and smiled. Today felt different somehow. Today felt special. The lunch rush at Miller's Diner was in full swing. The small restaurant buzzed with the sounds of clinking dishes, quiet conversations, and the steady hum of the coffee machine. Emma moved gracefully between tables, taking orders and serving food with a smile that never revealed her inner struggles. Her notepad was filled with scribbled orders, and her apron had small stains from the busy morning. She had perfected the art of looking cheerful even when her feet hurt and her back ached. Customers never knew that she had counted every penny in her purse that morning, or that she was already worrying about tomorrow's problems to them. She was just the friendly waitress who remembered how they liked their coffee. Lucy sat quietly in her corner booth, her small legs swinging back and forth under the table. She was being the perfect little helper, just as she had promised. Occasionally, she looked up from her coloring to watch her mother work, admiring how gracefully she moved between the tables. Lucy was proud of her mummy and the way everyone seemed to like her. The lunch crowd was mostly office workers and shoppers taking a break from their busy day. They filled the red-checkered tables, chatting about work and weather while enjoying Mr. Miller's famous fish and chips. The diner felt warm and alive, full of the comfortable noise of people enjoying their meals. When James walked through the door, a small bell above it jingled softly. Emma's back was turned as she cleaned a nearby table, wiping it down with careful, practiced movements. She was focused on her work, making sure every surface sparkled for the next customers. James paused for a moment at the entrance, his eyes scanning the familiar space. Everything looked exactly the same as it had 7 years ago. The same red tablecloths, the same old photographs on the walls, even the same smell of coffee and bacon in the air. He chose his usual spot by the window, the same table where he and Emma used to sit and dream about their future together. The window table had always been their favorite. They would sit there for hours, talking about everything and nothing. Emma would laugh at his silly jokes, and he would listen to her dreams of traveling the world. Those had been the happiest days of his life, before everything went wrong. Lucy, with the curious nature of a 6-year-old, noticed the sad-looking man. Immediately, something about him caught her attention in a way that other customers never did. He wore an expensive suit that looked out of place in the simple diner, but his eyes looked lonely. The same kind of loneliness she sometimes saw in her mother's eyes late at night when she thought Lou. Cy was sleeping. The man sat very still, like he was thinking about something important, and said, Lucy had seen that look before on her mother's face, especially on rainy evenings when they sat together on their small sofa. James ordered coffee from Jenny, the other waitress, and sat, staring out the window, lost in memories. The street outside was busy with people walking past, but he didn't really see them. His mind was far away, in a different time when everything had seemed possible. Slowly, carefully, he pulled out the old photograph and set it on the table. His fingers, which could sign million-pound contracts without shaking, trembled slightly as he ran them over Emma's smiling face in the picture. In the photo, she looked so young and happy, her hair blowing in the sea breeze at Brighton Beach. That's when Lucy saw it. From her corner booth, she had a perfect view of James's table. Her young eyes went wide as she recognized the woman in the photograph. It was her mummy. But how could this stranger have a picture of her mummy? Lucy had seen very few photographs of her mother from before she was born, and here was this sad man holding one like it was the most precious thing in the world. Lucy felt something deep in her heart, something she couldn't understand but couldn't ignore. It was like a warm feeling that started in her chest and spread through her whole body. This man looked like the person in her dreams, the father she had always imagined but never met. He had kind eyes, even though they looked sad, and something about his face seemed familiar. Her mother had always been vague about her daddy, saying only that he lived far away and didn't know about her. Maybe someday you'll meet him, Emma would say when Lucy asked, but she never gave any details. Lucy had created her own picture of what her father might look like, and this man matched it perfectly. Before Emma could stop her, before she even realized what was happening, Lucy slipped out of her booth. Her small feet moved with purpose across the diner floor. Guided by an instinct stronger than fear or shyness, she weaved between the tables, past surprised customers, straight toward the man with her mother's photograph. James looked up, startled, as the little girl approached his table. His breath caught in his throat like he had forgotten how to breathe. She had Emma's golden curls, the same shade of honey blonde that caught the light beautifully. But it was her eyes that made his heart stop. Bright blue eyes that were exactly like his own, the same eyes he saw every morning in the mirror. "Daddy," Lucy cried out, throwing her small arms round James's neck with complete trust and joy. The coffee cup crashed to the floor, hot liquid spreading across the tiles. The entire diner fell silent. Every conversation stopped, every fork paused halfway. To every mouth, Emma spun round at the sound of her daughter's voice, and when she saw who Lucy was hugging, the world stopped spinning. 7 years melted away in an instant. James and Emma stared at each other across the diner, both seeing their past and future colliding in the form of a beautiful little girl who somehow knew exactly where she belonged. Lucy? No, Emma rushed over. Her face flushed with embarrassment and confusion. Her heart was beating so fast she could hear it in her ears. The broken coffee cup lay scattered on the floor, and she could feel every pair of eyes in the diner, watching them. "I'm so sorry, sir. She doesn't usually." Emma stopped mid-sentence when she saw James's face clearly for the first time. The years had changed him in ways that success and money often do. There were lines round his eyes that hadn't been there before, and silver streaks ran through his once completely dark hair. His face looked older, more serious, like someone who had carried heavy responsibilities for too long. But she would know those kind of blue eyes anywhere, even after 7 years of trying to forget them. "Emma," James whispered, his voice barely audible above the diner's background noise. Her name came out like a prayer, like something he had been waiting to say for years. His hands shook slightly as he looked at her, this woman he had searched for endlessly. Standing right in front of him in a simple waitress uniform, Lucy looked back and forth between her parents, her young mind trying to understand why both adults looked like they were about to cry. She had never seen her mother look so shocked, and the man she had called Daddy had tears in his eyes. But instead of being scared, Lucy felt a warm happiness spreading through her chest. This felt right, like puzzle pieces finally fitting together. "Mummy, this is my daddy," Lucy said with the simple certainty that only children possess. Her voice was clear and confident, cutting through the tension in the air. "I dreamed about him. He has my eyes." She pointed to James's face, and then to her own, as if showing her mother something obvious that adults were too confused to see. In her 6-year-old world, things were either right or wrong. And this felt perfectly right. Emma's legs suddenly felt like they couldn't support her anymore. She sank into the booth across from James, her hands gripping the edge of the table to steady herself. Other customers were staring openly now, their conversations forgotten as they watched the drama unfolding. Some had their phones out, probably thinking about taking pictures, but Emma didn't care about any of that. Nothing mattered except the impossible scene happening right in front of her. The diner seemed to fade away around them, the noise of other people, the clinking of dishes, even the smell of coffee. Everything became background to this moment that felt like stepping into a dream. "How did you? I tried to find you," James said, his successful billionaire composure cracking like ice in warm water. The confident businessman who commanded boardrooms and made million-pound decisions was gone, replaced by a man who looked lost and desperate. "When you disappeared, I looked everywhere. I hired people. I checked every address, every phone book. Where have you been?" "Disappeared." Emma's voice rose slightly, attracting even more attention from nearby tables. A couple at the next booth had stopped eating entirely and were listening with obvious curiosity. "You told Richard you wanted nothing to do with me. He said you were too focused on your business for complications. He said I was just a distraction you couldn't afford." The words came out bitter and hurt, carrying 7 years of pain and rejection. Emma remembered the terrible phone call with Richard like it was yesterday. She had been 3 months pregnant, scared and alone, hoping that James would want to be part of their baby's life. James's face went pale, all the color draining from his cheeks like someone had pulled a plug. "Richard told you what?" "Emma, I never said that. I never said any of that." His voice was getting louder now, filled with a mixture of anger and desperation. "I loved you. When you stopped returning my calls, when your phone was disconnected, I thought you had moved on. I thought you didn't want me anymore. The truth began to emerge slowly, painfully, like pulling thorns from a wound. Richard, James's business partner and supposed friend, had been playing them both like pieces on a chessboard. He had intercepted Emma's desperate attempts to reach James, telling her that James was too busy building his empire to care about an unexpected pregnancy. At the same time, he had convinced James that Emma had only been interested in his growing wealth and had left when she realized he wouldn't give her the lifestyle she wanted. He answered your phone, Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. Every time I called, Richard would answer. He said you were in meetings or traveling, or that you had told him to handle it. He said you thought I was trying to trap you. I never gave him permission to answer my personal calls, James said, his hands clenched into fists on the table. Emma, I swear to you, I never knew you were trying to reach me. If I had known about the baby, about Lucy, who had been listening to this adult conversation with the serious expression children get when they know something important is happening, reached out and touched James's face gently. Her small hand was warm against his cheek, and her touch was surprisingly comforting. Don't be sad. Daddy, I'm here now, she said in her sweet, innocent voice. James felt tears he had held back for years finally fall. They rolled down his cheeks slowly, years of loneliness and regret finally finding their way out. He had a daughter, this beautiful, brave little girl who had somehow found him despite all the obstacles that had kept them apart. She had his eyes and Emma's smile, and she was calling him daddy like it was the most natural thing in the world. I would have been there, James said to Emma, his voice thick with emotion. If I had known about Lucy, about what you were going through, I would have been there every day. I would have held your hand at the doctor visits. I would have painted the nursery. I would have been there when she was born. Emma saw the truth in his eyes. The same honesty and love she had fallen for all those years ago. The hurt and anger she had carried like heavy stones in her heart began to soften, replaced by something she had thought was lost forever. Hope. 3 months later, Miller's diner looked exactly the same, but everything had changed. The same red checkered tablecloths covered the wooden tables. The same old photographs of London hung on the walls, and the same smell of fresh coffee and bacon filled the air. But for Emma, James, and Lucy, the world had transformed completely. Emma still worked there, moving between the tables with the same graceful movements, taking orders and serving food with her warm smile. But now it was by choice, not desperation. The dark circles under her eyes had faded, and her shoulders no longer carried the weight of constant worry. She no longer counted every penny in her purse or stayed awake at night wondering how she would pay the rent. James had quietly taken care of all her debts and expenses without making her feel like charity. He had paid off her credit cards, settled the overdue bills, and made sure she never had to worry about money again. But more importantly, he had taken care of her heart, slowly and carefully mending the pieces that had been broken for so many years. They didn't rush into anything romantic. Both of them understood that too much had happened, too much time had passed, for them to simply pick up where they had left off 7 years ago. Instead, they focused on Lucy, who became the center of their rebuilding world. Lucy blossomed under her father's attention, like a flower finally getting sunlight after a long, dark winter. She had spent 6 years wondering about her daddy, creating pictures of him in her mind, and now he was real and wonderful and completely devoted to her. James discovered the simple joys he had forgotten existed in his busy, wealthy life. He learned about bedtime stories, reading to Lucy every night from a collection of fairy tales and adventure books. His deep voice would fill her small bedroom as he told her about brave princesses and talking animals. He discovered the satisfaction of helping with homework. Sitting at the kitchen table with Lucy as she practiced writing her letters and learning to read simple words. Best of all, he learned about pushing Lucy on swings at the park near their new home. Higher, Daddy, higher, Lucy would laugh, her golden curls flying in the wind like silk ribbons. Her laughter was pure and infectious. James found himself laughing too, feeling younger than he had in years. Emma watched these moments with wonder and growing love. The successful billionaire she read about in newspapers, the man who made business deals worth millions of pounds, was also the man who got down on his hands and knees to play tea party with stuffed animals. She watched him learn to braid Lucy's hair by studying YouTube videos on his expensive phone, his tongue sticking out slightly in concentration as he practiced the complicated patterns. "You're a natural father," Emma told him one evening as they stood in the doorway of Lucy's new bedroom. The room was painted soft pink with white furniture, exactly what Lucy had dreamed of. James had let her choose everything herself, from the butterfly curtains to the bookshelf filled with new stories. "I have 7 years to make up for," James replied, gently closing Lucy's door after making sure she was sleeping peacefully. His voice was soft but determined. "With both of you, they were taking things slowly, rebuilding trust like people carefully constructing a house after a storm has blown the old one down." Emma was amazed to find that success and wealth hadn't changed. James's core kindness. He still remembered exactly how she liked her coffee, with just a tiny bit of milk and 1 sugar. He still made her laugh with silly jokes about talking vegetables and dancing cats. He still looked at her like she was the most beautiful woman in the world, even when she was tired after a long day at work. James, meanwhile, learned something that no business school had ever taught him. Real wealth wasn't measured in bank accounts or stock portfolios or expensive cars. It was measured in Lucy's spontaneous hugs when he came home from work, in Emma's smile when she saw him reading bedtime stories, in family dinners round a simple kitchen table where they talked about Lucy's day at school and planned weekend adventures. The peace that came from finally being where he belonged was worth more than all his business success combined. For the first time in years, James slept deeply through the night, no longer haunted by dreams of what he had lost. 1 year later, on a sunny Tuesday afternoon, James proposed to Emma in Miller's diner, at the same table where Lucy had run to him that first magical day. He had planned it carefully, arranging with Mr. Miller to have Lucy's favorite chocolate cake ready and asking the other regular customers to be there as witnesses. When Emma said yes, the entire diner erupted in cheers and applause. Customers who had become like family over the months clapped and whistled. Mr. Miller wiped tears from his eyes and declared that coffee was free for everyone for the rest of the day. "Will you be my mummy and daddy forever?" Lucy asked during the celebration, her face sticky with chocolate cake and her eyes bright with happiness. "Forever and always," Emma and James said together, pulling their daughter into a warm hug between them, as they sat in their booth, their family booth. Now, James realized that Lucy had been right all along from that very first day. Sometimes the heart knows things the mind cannot understand. Sometimes love finds a way, even when the world tries to keep it apart, and sometimes it takes the innocent wisdom of a child to show grown-ups what really matters. That home isn't a place with expensive furniture and fancy decorations. Home is the people who love you unconditionally, who accept you completely, and who make every ordinary day feel like a precious gift. The end.